The Pope and the Pontiff, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 28, reading from AnnaVonReitz.com. How many times have you heard references to the Pope? All your life there's been a Pope, right? And right along beside that, how many times have you heard references to the Pope as the Roman Pontiff? I think when I was about 5, I crawled up into my long-suffering father's lap and asked, what are they talking about when they say the Pope is the Pontiff? He rolled his eyes heavenward with an aggrieved expression on his face, not sure if it was the result of his reflections about the Pope and the Pontiff or the ongoing ordeal of having to answer my questions every day. The Pope, he explained, is the leader of the Catholic Church. He tells people what to believe about God and Jesus and the meaning of the Bible, but he has another job too. As the Pontiff, he decides who owns what and how people do business. Good old Dad, that's what the Pope does. That's what the Pontiff does. Make what you like of it. Nothing much has changed in 1200 years. For those who bother to poke into such things, it is no news that the entire concept of corporations was invented by the Roman Curia, the juridical body serving the Roman Pontiff. The Curia invented all different kinds of corporations you're familiar with: trusts, C Corps, S Corps, nonprofit corporations, cooperatives, foundations, LLPs and LLCs, and every other permutation of business structure you can think of except partnerships and sole proprietorships. None of these corporations we take for granted actually exist. They are all figments of the imagination and always have been, no matter how solid Exxon and the USA Inc. and GE may appear. Just like bridge and pinochle and hearts and poker are all card games, trusts and C Corps and cooperatives and foundations are all corporations. Just as the card games are defined by their cards and playing pieces and the rules of play, so corporations are similarly defined by their structures, like boards of directors and chief executive officers and their rules of play. The Roman Curia, under the leadership of the Roman Pontiff, creates and defines and sets up the rules of play for all corporations worldwide. That's why the Pontiff retains the right to amend or repeal the laws of any corporation. It's his game under his copyright, and he can do what he likes with it. Governments in the modern world are all corporations too. So guess what? That's right, the Roman Pontiff gets to repeal or amend any law made by any incorporated government or business. This has nothing to do with the Pope's role as the head of the Catholic Church. It's a separate office and a separate roster of functions, and it always has been. Of course, we all expect this one single man to be fair and do what's right by everyone, but past history has shown that expectation to be unfounded. Many Roman pontiffs have been greedy and self-interested and venal, and many corporate government CEOs have ignored the direction of the pontiff, even though he literally owns the game they are playing. This results in constant wars and economic hardships and vicious market manipulations, and the pontiff stands there, as Francis is doing, looking very stiff and stern and tight-lipped. It's his game, after all. If we want to play his game and use his corporate structures to define our governments, then we should live by his rules, right? And if not by his rules, then whose? Americans like to think of themselves as special and independent and so on. But our government from infancy was dependent on the greater government of the world beyond our shores. There were certain things, 19 of them to be exact, that we were ill-prepared to do for ourselves, so our states contracted with the Roman Pontiff and the British King to provide those services for us. That's how we wound up with a constitution that allows the foreign federal government corporation the delegated authority to control our money, our trade policies, our relations with the rest of the world, our commercial operations, and our military. We might as well have included the keys to our bathrooms, and that is the way it is and the way it has been from the time the ink dried on the actual Constitution. It was a flagrant giveaway of much of the power and responsibility that is naturally ours in exchange for peace and good faith service from the game masters. I leave it to you to figure out to what extent their responsibilities have been honored and disregarded, and also to discern the motives behind the great veneration given to the Constitution. So long as we mindlessly cling to it without insisting on terms of it being honored by the federales and their handlers in Britain and Rome, we enslave ourselves very neatly. As long as we allow ourselves to be mischaracterized as citizens of any stripe and allow our states to be represented by incorporated states of states like the state of California, they have free reign over us without the need to honor the actual Constitution at all. Remember that the Roman Pontiff and his vassal monarchs control everything that is incorporated. To be free of them and free of their system of things requires operating your own government as an unincorporated body politic. That is precisely what we are meant to do in this country. Given this dose of reality, it shouldn't be any mystery why I and other Americans dissatisfied with the service we have received would go to Rome to visit the Roman Pontiff upon being presented with the evidence of multiple betrayals, gross breaches of trust, and over misadministration of the federal government. It is no wonder that Pope Benedict XVI was overwhelmed, and little wonder that Pope Francis is dissatisfied. What remains to us as Americans is to wise up and bring forward our claims against the federales in no uncertain terms and before the entire world, while restoring our rightful unincorporated government at the county and state levels. The world that the Roman Pontiff and the British monarch create and control is a world of lies and half-truths that only Satan could inspire. But it is also a world that depends utterly upon rules and contracts for existence. The Roman Pontiff and pontiffs and the British monarch and monarchs have, over time, been caught red-handed, pants down around their ankles, operated in gross breach of trust, neglect, and dishonesty with regard to the only contract they have with us. Their duplicity, deceit, profit-mongering, and dishonor has turned the entire world into a slave market and been the cause of 2 world wars. It's time for it to stop. All Americans are called upon to demand that the Roman Pontiff and the British monarch and their successors at the UN and in France honor our agreement known as the Constitution for the United States of America and withdraw their interference against us in our lawful government permanently and cease and desist false claims against our people and our assets. All people worldwide, most especially the Catholics, are called upon to stand with us and exert the necessary pressure to bring about an end to the sale of bonds based on the assets and labor of living people. This secretive form of enslavement being practiced by the Roman Pontiff and the incorporated governments that serve at his pleasure is a gross affront to decency and law. The worldwide prohibition against slavery stands, and adding to one's sin by practicing personage against the innocent and pretending that enslavement of persons is allowable when it results in the enslavement of living men and women is nothing more than sophistry with which Satan's kingdom abounds. These and similar matters are the content of my communications with Benedict XVI and with Pope Francis alike. To the extent that they accept the necessity of reform and do in good faith and in spirit and in truth honor their obligations to America and the rest of the world from now on, I shall be their willing servant. To the extent that they continue to avoid the moral and contractual obligations that go with their authority, I shall not lift voice or finger in their support. Those of you who think you can avoid dealing with the Roman Pontiff in his role as the ruler of the incorporated world, or persist in the childish idea that the Pope has authority only in the Catholic Church, need to wake up and smell the Java. Pope Francis holds 2 offices which together serve to define the circumstances of our lives, whether we are at peace or at war, live in plenty or in poverty, are enslaved or set free. That being so, it behooves all of us to pay strict attention to everything the Pope/Pontiff says and does, and yes, to hold him accountable. It also behooves us to hold our incorporated governments feet first to the fire, and to, in the case of America, operate our own unincorporated government in a reasonable fashion. Here's another quote from Dad. Rights go with responsibilities. You can't have one without the other. See this and other 700 others on Anna's website, AnnaVonReitz.com. Spell it ANNAVONREITZ.com. The Government That Isn't, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 29, reading from AnnaVonReitz.com. What we call the federal government isn't a government. It is not and never has been. It is a governmental services corporation, which is a different matter entirely. Please take this outrageous but true statement into your mind and let it rattle around a bit. Savor the fact. Consider the consequences. The so-called United States government is not a sovereign government of any kind. It is at best an association of sovereign states entered into a mutual services contract with the United States Trading Company and its successors by default. From the very beginning, the states have been the sovereign units of government. Any power of the federal government has been delegated to it by the states, not the other way around. 19 very important powers, including production of our money, control of our commerce and trade policies, control of our armed forces except the militia, and control of our foreign policy, were delegated to the British monarch and the United States Trading Company in a quid pro quo in which the British monarch agreed to act as our trustee and protector on the high seas and navigable inland waterways in exchange for these concessions. That agreement was initially brokered and conceptualized as the Definitive Treaty of Peace, Paris, 1783, and particularized as the Constitution for the United States of America several years later. So from the start, there was the United States of America, an association of states subscribing to the service to be provided by the United States Trading Company, and there was the British servicer doing business as the United States. This has been the cause of a great deal of mostly deliberate confusion. When the states assembled in Congress, it meant that they elected fiduciary deputies accountable to the states, people known as senators and congressmen, and sent them to a meeting called a Congress of the States to discuss and decide matters of mutual interest and establish a body of law applicable in all states known as the United States Statutes at Large. Things went along well enough for several decades, but the British monarch and the Pope conspired in secret breach of trust to undermine the American government via the Treaty of Verona 1822. What they commenced can only be called a gigantic fraud scheme. The Constitution, agreed to by the states, has always prohibited anyone from holding a foreign title of nobility, from holding public elected office in the government at any level. In 1819, this provision was strengthened and ratified by the states as the Titles of Nobility Amendment. As a result, no member of the Bar Association bearing the title Esquire could serve in the American government in any public elected office. When Abraham Lincoln, a bar member, was elected President of the United States in 1860, he was not eligible to serve as President of the United States of America, the association of sovereign states participating in the Congress. Do you see the trick now? It was then and is now permitted for members of the bar to hold any private corporate office, even elected corporate offices of the United States Trading Company, or any other such governmental services corporation that followed. They were only prohibited from holding public elected office in our government. Lincoln used his private corporate office, President of the United States, to overthrow the public elected government of the United States of America, and he did it by fraud and similar names deceits. The so-called federal government has operated under conditions of breach of trust, fraud, deceit, non-disclosure, and inland piracy ever since, shamelessly substituting its private corporate offices for the public offices we are owed. Each president since Lincoln has functioned as President of the United States, and the vast majority of them have been bar members ineligible to function as President of the United States of America, even if they had been properly elected and empowered. As a result of this egregious and carefully concealed fraud upon the American people, there has been no lawfully elected government since 1860, merely what appears to be one. Even the great conflict giving rise to this circumstance has been misrepresented as the American Civil War, when in fact no such war can be shown to exist. There was never a valid declaration of war and never a peace treaty ending it. It is simply an illegal mercenary conflict that the perpetrators of all this rot have kept simmering on our shores for 150 years. Lincoln, like Barack Obama, was a British Crown agent and an attorney who did not meet the requirements to be President of the United States of America, nor even President of the United States of America, styled in two different ways, but who was eligible to serve as President of the United States, and in that foreign private corporate office, they have wreaked havoc and misery upon the innocent American people. It is well past the hour in which we must wake up and realize that our supposed friends and allies have been closer to friends and allegories. The so-called federal government is merely a storefront for competing international banking cartels. The so-called Federal Reserve Cartel claims to have purchased the name and copyrights and trademarks to the United States of America, and the IMF cartel claims the same about the United States. They are both commercial crime syndicates that deserve nothing but a prompt liquidation of assets and claims and the return of all property to their priority creditors, the American states and people. It's time that we all rose up with one voice and accused the Roman Pontiff and the British monarch of the crimes of their predecessors and addressed the gross breach of trust that their predecessors have been guilty of, and the equally gross fraud that has been practiced against us, together with the crimes of identity theft, press ganging, inland piracy, unlawful conversion of assets, enslavement, and kidnapping that have been the daily fare of their regimes for the past 150 years. The good names of the States of America and United States of America belong to us as the lawful heirs and holder in due course, without respect to any claims made by the banks of the Federal Reserve. The United States deserves nothing but a swift kick to the curb. The United States, styled as all capital letters, deserves nothing but a swift kick to the curb. All these fraudulent claims and operations must be exposed, and these conditions must be completely reformed. We must work hard to fully restore our lawful government on the land, call together our jural assemblies to operate our actual counties and states, and regain our senses. For 150 years, Americans have been asleep at the wheel, being deliberately misled to believe that a governmental services corporation is the same thing as their own lawful government. That gullibility has cost us millions of lives, trillions of dollars, and sullied our name throughout the world, as we've been blamed for the lawlessness, treachery, bigotry, and immorality of the pirates that have claimed to represent us and done terrible and oppressive things in our names. The bad news is that we've been clueless and trusting enough to allow this. The good news is that we don't have to allow it anymore. If you love your country and value your lives, it's time to sit hard on the archbishops and cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church worldwide. Make them all fully aware of the absolutely immoral and duplicitous actions of generations of popes with regard to this country. Popes who have waved olive branches and preached love out of one side of their mouths, and then, as the Roman pontiffs, have secretly pursued war and profit and committed all manner of crimes under color of the church's skirts. If Franciscus, styled as all capital letters, thinks he's going to continue these practices unobserved, let's give him a good salvo and inform him that no, he is not. Let him know that the entire world is watching and that the church is not going to be able to play duplicitous games and breach of trust without paying the full and awful price for its hypocrisy and criminality and double-mindedness. It is indeed time for confession and the making of amends, and if not, it is time for the Roman cult to be reorganized as a satanic, festering, cancerous sore in the body of the church, a disease that needs to be eradicated both from within and without, or it will most certainly kill its host. The same basic message needs to be carried to the Lords of Admiralty, the Lord Mayor of London, and the British monarch. They have not escaped detection. Their hideous mismanagement of their American concession in Washington, D.C. has been duly noted by the Americans as well as the rest of the world, which places them squarely between a rock and a very hard place. All these years that they have been wheedling and cheating and dealing in fraud and pretending to represent us, they have misused and abused American servicemen and women who now know the truth of the matter. that they have been slaughtered and become unwitting murderers in wars for profit, lied to, and then left abandoned as human flotsam without jobs, without health care, without educations, without a future. Our veterans have little to lose and good reason to hate everything that the Admiralty, the Lord Mayor, the Queen, and the Bar Associations have stood for. The rest of the world that has suffered seemingly at the hands of Americans now knows who the culprits are, who the actual culprits are. It's high time that we told the federales where to get off our soil and our backs. See this article and over 700 others on Anna's website, AnnaVonReitz.com, spelled ANNAVONREITZ.com. Find the PayPal and give generously for the continuance of the work. It's the Political System, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 30. I'm reading from AnnaVonReitz.com. This comes from our brethren in South Africa, where the struggle to be free and at peace has always been a constant issue. One of the architects of the central banking system, Sir Denison Miller, is attributed with saying, "This truth is well known among our principal men, now engaged in forming an imperialism of capital to govern the world. By dividing the voters through the political party system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting over questions of no importance. Thus, by discreet action, we can secure for ourselves what has been so well planned and so successfully accomplished." So there it is again, divide and conquer, pillar and post, either or, Democrats or Republicans. They, whoever they are, select them, and we have no choice but to elect them. And the entire presumed difference between the two political parties is just that, a difference that we only believe exists based on external signs and rhetoric, but which in fact is staged and purposeful and illusionary. I thought of the endless squabbles we have had over useless things and could only nod as I read the quote. Millions are unemployed, millions of families are routinely destroyed, our educational system is falling apart, our science is politicized, bridges are literally falling down, and we're wasting time arguing about transgender bathrooms. Truly, modern politics is a circus in the sense of the Roman Colosseum, something so to distract and entertain us while the Visigoths are creeping through the weeds and crooks are plundering the public treasury. The real business of a public government isn't being done in America and hasn't been done in a very long time. That's largely because we have political parties to distract us. Teddy Roosevelt knew the real purpose of political parties. That's why when he couldn't find support from the Republican Party, he formed his own Bull Moose Party. Find an emblem, raise a flag, get your gang to outspin their gang, and whatever you do, keep things polarized. How about this idea from a recent newspaper column in Anchorage, Alaska, the Yellow Lab Party, where politicians are honest and friendly and truly concerned about the public well-being. They may be eager for treats, but their intentions are good. Even if you view all political parties with a jaundiced eye, as I do, and even if you admit that they serve no good purpose beyond entertainment and debate, why only two parties? Boring, polarizing, always the same. Democrats get into office and spend the public purse and cheat the people blind. Republicans get into office and spend the public purse and cheat the people blind. Where is the entertainment value in that? It's like wasting your money on bad, predictable, cheesy movies year after year, decade after decade. And I just love it when people say, "You'll waste your vote. If you choose anything different, waste my vote." What vote did I ever have in the first place? None whatsoever. Corrupt private political parties choose the candidate roster. Corrupt private political parties choose the issues to be addressed. Corrupt private political parties came up with the emblems. Donkeys and elephants? Come on now, how lame is that? No, don't blame me for any of it. I recognize it as Babylonian sophistry designed to placate the masses and make everyone think that they have a dog in the fight, and even convince them that there is a fight, when in actuality it's just two gangs vying for the franchise to practice legalized theft. It all has the same results. There's nothing honorable or meaningful involved, just a perennial choice between awfully bad and really, really terrible. This is no doubt the primary reason over 2/3 of Americans just close their eyes and block it all out. Politics and political parties, the only means of change offered by the game masters, is in fact a form of co-option. If you play the game at all, you become responsible for it and for its outcomes. Many people get deluded and desperately concerned about politics because they mistakenly believe that this is their remedy and the only way they have to steer the boat. I would argue that simply by not doing anything related to the corporate dog and pony show, by not registering, by not participating, by waking up, you vote against the system itself. You also deny them that quintessentially important thing, a public mandate. While no mainstream media or politician is likely to comment on this fact, there hasn't been a public mandate for or against anything in America for decades. Not enough people vote in these phony elections to create a mandate. There is never anything close to even a 51% majority. Without a mandate, what the governmental services corporations do is obviously and strictly private and lacking authority, even in their funky system of things. Saul Alinsky wrote his rules for radicals, so now I'm writing mine. Sometimes not doing something is as important as working your rump off. Simply refusing to participate can be a revolutionary act and can be more effective in securing change than all the efforts of all armies of the world. Having rescinded any voter registrations and washed your hands of any responsibility related to the political parties, you are now free to spend your money and time restoring your actual government and making it strong enough to hand these charlatans their hats. Always remember that you're dealing with a governmental services corporation which is in the business of selling you governmental services. This isn't going to change no matter who gets elected to fill their private corporate offices. The far more important and necessary change is for us to speak to our public servants and tell them what we need done and how much we are willing to pay for it, instead of letting the republic be represented by for-hire lackeys who have a built-in conflict of interest. It's time to present ourselves and direct our own business affairs through our own general assemblies, land jurisdiction counties, and land jurisdiction states. Put all the energy you sidetracked into arguing over such vital issues as unisex bathrooms and traffic cameras, and all the money you spent on political candidates too, into restoring your rightful government. With your rightful government restored, you won't have to worry about who gets elected to run the governmental services corporations, because whoever gets elected to do that job will have to answer to you, and not just because you gave them a donation. See this and over 700 articles on Anna's website, AnnaVonReitz.com. Spell it ANNAVonReitz.com.